He burst into the palace infirmary to find chaos. Alien medics, tall, willowy beings with translucent crests and skin the color of deep ocean, were speaking in urgent, trilling syllables. Diagnostic screens around the central medical pod flashed. In warning red dot in that pod lay Princess Syria, heir to the Zellerian throne. Her silver-blue skin was dull, the vibrant bioluminescent markings along her neck fading into pale lines. She was barely breathing. Aaron was supposed to be on standby for Earth's diplomatic delegation, a political safety net, a polite gesture. Humans had only recently secured a fragile peace treaty with the Xylarian Empire, and his presence had been more symbolic than necessary. But now, symbolism didn't matter. This was life or death. A Xylarian medic looked up, eyes wide with frustration. "We have tried every purge. The toxin resists our cell scrubbers. She will not last another cycle." Aaron stepped closer, scanning the vitals. Her organs were failing. In sequence first her respiratory sacs, now her cardiac lattice. He recognized the pattern instantly. The poison was synthetic, designed to bypass Xylarian immunity. A targeted assassination. A heavy presence filled the room, and the voices stilled. The king of Xylar himself entered, draped in ceremonial gold, armor that shimmered under the sterile lights. His deep-set eyes swept the scene before locking onto Aaron. "You are the human doctor," he said in a deep, resonant voice. "Can you save her?" Aaron didn't answer immediately. He calculated in his head, weighing probabilities. He could use human nanite-infused plasma to flood her system and dismantle the toxin molecule by molecule. But the procedure had never been tested on a Xylarian. The nanites could mistake her cells for the toxin and destroy them. "If I try, there's a chance it kills her faster," Aaron admitted. The king's jaw tightened. "And if you do nothing?" Aaron glanced at the vitals numbers falling like sand through an hourglass. "She'd be gone in minutes." The king didn't hesitate. "Then you will try." The alien medics began protesting instantly, their voices overlapping in sharp tones. "Human biology is incompatible. Your medicine is too aggressive. It will destroy her nerve lattice." Aaron blocked them out. His hands were already moving, pulling a vial from his medkit, loading it into a sterile injector. He adjusted the nanite behavior profile in real time, rewriting parameters to avoid tearing apart her unique biofibers. His heart pounded, but his movement stayed precise. He leaned over her. Even unconscious, Syria's presence was striking. Her breathing was shallow, her pulse a faint vibration beneath his fingers. He thought about the oath he had taken years ago, not the political agreements or interspecies treaties, but the human one. The one that said you help the person in front of you, no matter the cost. "Hang in there," he murmured. The injector hissed as it pierced her skin. The nanites swarmed into her bloodstream, carrying the antitoxin in microdoses, beginning the dismantling process. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The beeping monitors didn't change. Her chest rose and fell in weak, irregular intervals. Aaron's stomach tightened. Then one soft, sharp inhale. Her vitals twitched upward. The cardiac lattice resensed, her breathing deepened and faint. Bioluminescent light began crawling back across her skin. It was working. Her eyes flickered, open large, iridescent, and startlingly human in their expression. She studied him as if memorizing his face. Her lips parted, and in a voice rough with exhaustion, she whispered in halting Terran standard, "Thank you." Aaron felt the tension in his shoulders loosen for the first time since he'd entered the room. The king's eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. "You have done what my own could not," he said, voice low but carrying weight. Aaron only nodded, already pulling back to give the medics room to stabilize her further. He didn't yet realize the depth of the consequences, political, personal, and otherwise that would come from this single decision. Aaron wasn't sure if this was going to be a ceremony of thanks or an execution. The walk to the hall was long, deliberately so. Xylarian architecture favored scale over comfort. The corridors were vast enough to make a human feel small, lined, with statues of past rulers carved from obsidian. At each junction, armored guards stood motionless, their insectal helmets giving away nothing. When the enormous crystal doors finally swung open, Aaron stepped into a chamber that could have housed an entire Terran embassy. The floor was polished black stone, veined with molten gold. Overhead, bioluminescent vines spiraled along the walls, their glow painting the air in shades of emerald and violet dot at the far end. Seated upon a raised dais was the king of Xylar. Beside him sat Syria, alive and radiant, her markings glowing once more in vibrant blue. She was dressed not in ceremonial robes, but in a simple flowing gown, though even in simplicity, she carried herself like royalty. Aaron was escorted to the center of the chamber. The guard stopped a respectful distance away but didn't leave. He noticed more than a dozen high-ranking nobles gathered along the hall sides, each wearing expressions somewhere between curiosity and suspicion. Dr. Vale, the king, began, his voice carrying through the vaulted space with ease. You acted in defiance of our physicians. You risked my daughter's life with untested methods. Aaron kept his gaze level. And I'd do it again. A murmur rolled through the courtrobe, swishing as heads turned toward one another, whispers like leaves rustling. No one spoke to the king that way. The king tilted his head, studying Aaron. You value life above safety. That is rare. In this court, Aaron shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny. He didn't think of it as rare, it was just what doctors did. But he was starting to suspect that, in this empire, medicine was often secondary to politics. The king rose from his throne and descended the dais. He moved with the slow grace of someone used to being watched, each step deliberate. When he stood before Aaron, the air between them felt heavy, charged. You saved my bloodline, the king said. For that, I would reward you. Aaron braced himself for the usual gestures, medals, treasures, maybe a political favor for Earth. Instead, the king spoke words that silenced the chamber. I grant you the oath of bloodline. The reaction was instant. Nobles gasped audibly. A few actually took a step back, as if Aaron had suddenly become dangerous. Even Syria's eyes widened. Aaron blinked. What? The king didn't answer right away. Instead, a ceremonial blade was brought forward by an attendant clad in white. The weapon's hilt was made of living crystal, pulsing faintly with light. The oath of bloodline, the king explained, is not given lightly. It binds you to the royal family of Xylar. From this day forth, you will have our protection, our privileges and our enemies. Aaron's brow furrowed. This isn't just an honorary title, is it? No, the king said simply. It is kinship. He drew the blade across his palm in a shallow cut, letting thick, dark blood bead at the surface. Then he extended his hand toward Aaron. In our law, to share blood is to share fate. Aaron hesitated. This wasn't just a cultural formality, if the Xylarian records were to be believed. The oath was legally binding, recognized across dozens of allied worlds. It meant that harming him would be as serious as harming the princess herself, but it also meant inheriting the dangers that came with royal blood. For a moment, he considered refusing, but then he glanced toward Syria. She was watching him with a faint, knowing smile, as if she already knew what he'd choose. Aaron drew a breath, took the blade, and mirrored the king's gesture, slicing his own palm. His blood red and human mingled with the king's dark, shimmering ichor as their hands clasped. The contact was warm, almost electric. He felt a strange pull in his chest, as if some unseen tether had just been fastened. "It is done," the king declared, and the chamber echoed with the sound of ceremonial gongs. Aaron let go, flexing his hand. He still didn't fully understand what he had just agreed to, but from the way every noble was staring at him, now some with awe, others with open hostility, he knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, there was no going back. At first, the change was almost surreal. Overnight, Aaron went from being that human doctor to Prince Vale in the eyes of the court. Doors that had been firmly closed to outsiders now slid open without hesitation. Bureaucratic restrictions that once required weeks of clearance evaporated. He had free access to palace wings even most nobles weren't allowed to enter, but privileges were only one side of the coin. The other side was far sharper. Where once he could walk the palace corridors anonymously, now eyes followed him everywhere. Some were filled with curiosity. Humans were still rare in the Xylarian Empire, but others burned with quiet resentment. More than once, Aaron overheard nobles muttering in low tones as he passed, "Unworthy outsider, the king's indulgence." A dangerous precedent that it wasn't paranoia. Syria confirmed it one evening when they crossed paths in the palace gardens. The gardens were unlike anything on Earth, towering crystal trees, pools of silver water that mirrored the night sky, flowers that sang in faint chimes when touched by the wind. She walked beside him barefoot, the grass-like fronds brushing against her ankles, the glowing markings on her skin casting soft light. "You've unsettled them," she said without preamble. Aaron glanced at her. "Them?" "They?" "Court. The High Council. Anyone who believes the blood of the royal line should never be shared with an outsider, especially a human." She plucked a petal from a flower that shifted color in her hand, tossing it into the water. "Some see you as a threat to the natural order." Aaron gave a short laugh. "I didn't ask for any of this." "No," she said with a small, amused smile. "That's exactly why my father gave it to you." He stopped walking. "Meaning?" Syria's gaze turned serious. "In Xylarian politics, those who want power are the ones least suited to wield it. You," she gave a tiny shrug, "you want it only to save a life. My father values that more than ambition. But not everyone agrees." Her words were meant as reassurance, but they also carried an unspoken warning. The warning proved true within days. A message arrived from the human delegation congratulating him, but beneath the polite language, Aaron detected a note of concern. One of the senior diplomats spelled it out privately over a secure comm channel. "Vale, you've just been made a player in Xylarian politics. That's a dangerous game for someone without allies." Aaron wasn't sure he wanted to play any game at all. His days were still filled with medical work treating soldiers wounded in training, tending to palace staff with rare conditions, but now he was also expected to attend royal functions, advise on health policy, and oddly enough, sit in on diplomatic councils. It became clear the king wasn't just rewarding him. He was placing him somewhere deliberate, somewhere strategic. One night, Aaron found himself alone in one of the private libraries reserved for the royal family. The room smelled faintly of metallic ink, the shelves lined with translucent data scrolls. He was scanning through Xylarian legal code when a shadow fell across the doorway. It was Syria. She stepped inside quietly, her gaze lingering on him. "You work too much," he raised an eyebrow. "Says the woman who's already attending state functions 3 days after recovering from a near-death poisoning." She laughed softly, but the sound was tinged with something else. "You think saving my life was the hardest part?" "No, Dr. Vale. The hardest part is keeping me alive now." The words caught him off guard. "You think someone will try again?" The guest list read like the galaxy's political map. Representatives from over a dozen allied worlds had gathered to reaffirm trade agreements and military pacts. Xylarian nobles mingled with insectoid envoys from the Trihive Alliance, Amphibian, merchant lords from Aquilis Prime, and a handful of human delegates in formal dress. Erin sat at the king's table, 2 seats away from Syria. She was the picture of grace, engaging in conversation with visiting dignitaries while somehow keeping an eye on the room. Erin, still unused to his place in such gatherings, kept mostly quiet, focusing on the flow of the banquet and his assigned role as the king's newly bound blood kin. The music swelled, a blend of deep choral harmonics and crystal chimes. Servants glided between tables, carrying trays of rare delicacies. That was when Erin noticed it. One servant, a male Xylarian, tall and broad-shouldered, moved differently. His steps were too deliberate, his gaze fixed too narrowly. He wasn't scanning the tables or adjusting his tray like the others. His eyes never left the king's table. Erin's instincts prickled. He'd seen that same body language on field. Medics during combat evacuations, not the calm grace of service, but the tight focus of someone preparing to act. The servant drew closer. Weaving between diplomats, Erin's eyes tracked his hands. Beneath the folds of his serving cloth, the man's fingers shifted in a precise, practiced motion. A flash of metal glinted under the light. Weapon. Erin didn't think he moved. In one fluid motion, he shoved his chair back, crossed the space to Syria, and grabbed her shoulders, pulling her down just as the servant lunged forward. A blade curved, crystalline, and glowing faintly slashed through the air where Syria's neck had been moments before. Gasps and shouts erupted. Erin twisted, catching the attacker's wrist with both hands, driving his knee into the joint. The blade clattered to the floor. The servant snarled, trying to wrench free, but Erin pivoted, slamming him into one of the massive crystal pillars. Guards were already rushing forward. The man struggled, his eyes wild with something more than desperation. There was hate there, deep and personal. Erin's grip tightened. For an instant, their eyes locked. He knew that face. Not well, but enough to place him one of the king's senior advisors. He had been present in council meetings Erin attended. He had smiled at him across the chamber. He had clapped during the oath ceremony. The realization hit like ice water. This wasn't some rogue agent from outside the palace. This was an inside job. The guards seized the attacker, dragging him away. The nobles' shocked whispers filled the hall, rising in waves of speculation and fear. Syria sat upright again, her breathing fast but steady. "Are you hurt?" Erin asked. She shook her head. "You moved faster than the guards." Erin didn't answer. He was still watching the retreating figure of the would-be assassin, trying to reconcile the betrayal. The man had held the king's trust for years. If he had turned, who else might be plotting? Later, after the chaos had calmed and the banquet was cut short, the king summoned Erin to his private chamber. "I am told," the king said, pacing before the throne, "that you shielded my daughter with your own body." Erin nodded. It wasn't exactly a decision. The king stopped pacing, his gaze steady. "Everything is a decision. You could have frozen. You could have hesitated. You didn't either." Erin exhaled slowly. "And one of your own advisors tried to kill her." The king's jaw tightened. "I am aware. And I am aware of what it means." They stood in silence for a moment, the unspoken truth hanging in the air. This was no longer a matter of court rivalry. This was war inside the palace walls. The king's voice lowered. "This is why I gave you the oath, Dr. Vale. I knew the threats to my daughter would not end. Now you are bound to her. And she to you. That is her greatest shield." Months passed after the assassination attempt, but the palace never truly returned to its old rhythm. Security doubled. Servants were vetted through exhaustive screenings. Council meetings were tense, every word measured, every glance weighed for hidden intent. Aaron adjusted to his new life, though adjusted was a generous word. His daily existence had become a careful balance between his role as a physician and his unexpected position as a political figure. He still worked in the medical wing, treating injuries and illnesses, but now he also attended military briefings, diplomatic receptions, and strategic discussions about threats to the royal family. He wore both a medic's uniform and ceremonial robes, two identities that didn't always sit comfortably on his shoulders. Syria was never far from his orbit. She had insisted on keeping him close, often framing it as for her protection. But Aaron was beginning to realize it was as much for his as it was for hers. The failed assassination had marked them both as high-value targets. If an enemy couldn't reach her, they might try to reach him instead. Their relationship deepened, not just through shared danger, but in the quiet moments between storms. Walking through the gardens at night, trading sarcastic remarks during tedious banquets, sharing meals in her private quarters when public appearances felt too exhausting. It wasn't romance. Not yet, but it was something built on trust. And trust, Aaron had learned, was a rare currency in the Xylurian court. One evening, on the anniversary of the day he had saved her life, Aaron was summoned to the throne hall once more. The summons was unexpected. The hall was empty of nobles and guards. Only the king and Syria stood there, waiting. Aaron approached, bowing slightly out of habit. "Your Majesty?" The king's gaze was steady. "You have done more than save my daughter's life, Dr. Vale. You have kept her alive. In the months since, despite threats from both outside and within our own walls." Aaron gave a small shrug. "She makes it easy." Syria snorted softly beside her father. "Liar. I've been nothing but trouble." The king's lips twitched, but his voice stayed formal. "You speak lightly of it, but I do not. My daughter is alive not only because of your skill, but because of your choices. When others hesitated, you acted. When others sought gain, you sought nothing." Aaron shifted, unsure where this was leading. "I just did my job." The king shook his head. Slowly. "No, you lived by your own code, and that code has bound you to us more deeply than any law could. The oath of bloodline was meant to reward you, but I see now it also transformed you." Syria stepped forward then, her gaze meeting his. "Do you know what the hardest thing about my position is, Aaron? Not the politics, not the danger. It's the isolation. Everyone wants something from me: power, favor, influence. You're the only one who never asked for anything except the truth." Aaron didn't know what to say. He felt the weight of the moment, the way the room seemed to quiet even further. "My father rewarded you with the oath," Syria continued softly, "but I want to give you something he couldn't." She took his hand. It wasn't ceremonial. It wasn't bound by law or tradition. It was personal. "I was supposed to see you as my savior once," she said. "Somewhere along the way you became my choice." Aaron's throat tightened. This wasn't the kind of declaration you could respond to with politics or humor. He squeezed her hand gently, understanding exactly what she meant. The king watched them both with an expression Aaron couldn't quite read, something between satisfaction and quiet resignation. "Then it is settled," he said. "From this day, you are not merely a guardian of the royal bloodline. You are part of it, in bond, in trust, and if you so choose, in future." Aaron realized then what his true reward had been all along. It wasn't the privileges, the status, or the legal protections. It was belonging. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just a visitor in someone else's world. He had a place in it, a place he had earned not through negotiation or politics, but by acting when it mattered most. And when Syria smiled at him, her hand still in his, he knew the truth. This was a life worth risking everything for.